let me share screen. And here we are. Okay, so we're going to begin session 7. And last week we talked about how do we find people to volunteer, how do we build a team. And I give you certain indications and suggestions. You can personally invite people to come and observe your activities and then invite them. Or you can give an announcement in church or in the whatever media you have and openly invite people to come, take a look, and then see whether there is something they can do in your ministry. In a church context, you could get students to testify at the ministry gatherings or at the church gatherings, and then to let them talk about how God reached out to them, how the ministry reached out to them. So other church members listening in can say, yeah, I think that's something I want to do, changing lives like that. And making the work of the ministry visible. In some churches, you've got such big churches, people don't know what's going on in the ministries. And so it is good to make the ministry visible. I mentioned, for example, having a baptism of your students at the main service, and then people will say, oh, we have this ministry. I've had some volunteers who come after they watched baptisms and they say, hey, there's a ministry I want to be involved in. Or even just organizing Christmas dinners, Thanksgiving dinners, and involving the whole church to host and using the church halls to locate the event. And of course, for those churches with small groups, you can go visit small groups and share about the ministry. And usually small groups are receptive because everyone is paying attention. And of course, students can be volunteers, as I said. Now, you could do recruitment for specific positions, because some people would respond to a specific invitation. Hey, we need 5 cooks. Hey, we need ESL teachers. If you're a teacher, you know how to teach, please come, and so on. If you don't know how to teach ESL, we'll train you, so people would come forward. And seminary interns, that's a good source. People in training, they you could go to the seminary and say, we've got internship positions for your students to learn how to minister. Having retirees, don't forget that retirees, sometimes retirees say, oh, I'm useless, I'm old and useless. No, you're not. You have one gift at least. Everybody says, the Bible says everybody has one gift. So if your gift is just being able to speak in English, really seriously, because, we have programs where we can match a retiree with a student, and all they do is talk to each other, learning how to speak conversational English. That's a skill which students would want. And a lot of retirees, they may have a lot of time, they have a lot of ability, like maybe cooking or doing things that they enjoy, and they just invite the students to join them. And of course, full-time employees, if you've got a big enough work, you can employ. Now, I want to now open up this for today's session. Okay. How do we manage? I think last week I mentioned that there are 3 levels of workers that you can have. First, the casual. And the casual is anybody, even just once. Hey, we've got dinner and we need servers, 10 of them, 20 of them. We have got a big dinner. So servers can come forward, and that's the one time they ever volunteer with you, that's fine. So they're casual volunteers, one-off, maybe every now and then, that's fine. Then you've got the second level, which is rather more committed. You put them on rosters and you put them on specific duties. I've got 10 drivers. the next event coming up, we need three, which three of you are able. So they're committed to be on a pool, but you still can select them for specific events so that they don't get tired and they don't get to do every single thing that you do, right? Then they get very tired and they get perhaps even frustrated and fed up. And then the highest level would be your leader, your teacher, your volunteer who has direct involvement with the students. You need them to be checked more thoroughly, right? So I mentioned screening, and of course, screening would involve collecting data. You can have application forms for your volunteers, but make sure you comply with the Data Protection Act. You make sure that they give consent. They know that the forms are being collected and kept carefully, confidentially, but we used to perhaps screen what kind of gifts they have, what kind of time they have, so that you know how to allocate them to the right activities and tasks. And so for the students, you also need to, I mean, for the volunteers, you need to explain to them that we need police checks because we're dealing with vulnerable students. Generally speaking, vulnerable students may be young and disabled, or people in specific groups. Well, international students are vulnerable because they are trusting, they're not aware of their rights, they don't know a lot of things, and so they can be easily cheated and deceived. So we consider them vulnerable, and those who are committed volunteers, we need them to get a police check. And those who are leaders and teachers, we want them to have a full police check with a fingerprint, right? And we need to check references. I give examples of how, some people who are not suitable in my ministry, in a big church like People's Church, 5,000 people, not everybody, even the pastors, not everybody knows everybody. So they are not suitable for my ministry. They go to some other ministry and they get accepted. And we shouldn't be too desperate to get just anyone. We need volunteers. Oh, if you can move and breathe, it's okay. No, I think we need to be careful because we're dealing with vulnerable students. So we need to check if they have the character or the character defects, whether they have the gifts, whether they have the right attitudes. Even they may have a lot of gifts and they think they're so great, the greatest thing that's invented since sliced bread, and then they want to do great things, and you have to say sorry, you're not suitable. So we need to check the references for them, for the volunteers, from friends maybe who know them, from pastors who know them. And even if you've got all these things done, you still can deploy them, you assign them to a task and observe them. If they're no good, then you have to tell them. And of course, if they don't have the gifts, they don't know what to do. Of course, we do training like this, briefings and trainings, getting them ready. And in a full-blown ministry, over the years, you have different instruction sheets, manuals, things you write down, instructions you write down. You put it into a booklet and you give it to them. They can read on their own, or put it on a website. These days, it's open. They can read and they can decide whether it's for them. And of course, if some of these things are confidential and sensitive, maybe you don't put it on a public website and give them passwords to access. And some people, some ministries, some churches, they get these volunteers to sign covenants, an agreement. I am committed to doing this, and this. I'm committed to obeying the instructions and so on and so forth, right? You could do that. Doesn't mean anything, you can't sue them, but at least they have written down something in writing and they can read it for themselves and remind themselves what they are supposed to do and what they're not supposed to do. So managing a team includes some very unpleasant tasks. Okay, what do we do with people unsuitable? I think we need to tell them they're not suitable for the ministry, but I think if we are, in Asian cultures, we tend to be very averse to telling people the bad news, telling them no, telling them, please go. So I think it's good to put them aside and, have the most senior leader. Don't, sometimes we have team leaders, maybe to tell somebody to go, you need the highest leader, right? The team leader, ministry leader for the whole ministry, or the pastor, senior pastor. So somebody to tell them, you can give the bad news in a nice way. We appreciate your labor. We appreciate your willingness to serve, but we see that you actually are not suitable for this ministry or for this particular job. Can we move you somewhere else? Can we, is moving somebody to another ministry or position might be easier than just telling them, please go. Unless, of course, they really, and it's just no use for anything. I hope there isn't such a person. But if you feel that they are not suitable because they're not teachable, they don't listen to instructions, and they try to do their own thing, I refuse to accept your reasons why. I give you a very real example. I had a volunteer who was very enthusiastic, very hardworking. Yeah, I appreciate that. But she was just very and she gets triggered. Okay, some people get triggered by different things, and she gets triggered when somebody tells her that she's from China, and she says, no, I'm from Hong Kong, and it's a different place. So then she goes into politics and all that, and we have to say, can you tone that down, and please don't talk about whatever politics you are on, this side or that side, the Christians on both sides of the debate. Can we just focus on helping the students have a good experience and not be dragged into your particular politics? And they still don't listen. I say, well, thank you very much for serving, but I don't think we have a place for you in this ministry, right? Because she refuses to listen to us telling her, please don't talk about Hong Kong on this side or that side of your view. And if you don't stop, then we have to tell you to go. Yeah. Okay. And it happens, yeah, because there are people with maybe even different views about the vaccine, the disease, COVID, and some say that it doesn't exist, well, we can work with all kinds, provided you just don't raise these issues and cause a ruckus. Yeah. Now, so if they're unwilling to agree with ministry leaders, this is why some churches have covenants. You covenant that you will listen to the ministry leader, and if don't, then you just quit because you cannot comply with the covenant anymore. So be ready if you're a ministry leader to say, I'm so sorry, I'm the leader of the ministry, and if you don't want to listen to my instructions, then please find another leader in another ministry that you can agree with, and God bless you as you go, right? So be nice, but be firm. I think sometimes you just have to be firm. Some people think that, as I said, the greatest thing, the greatest invention since sliced bread, and they can't see why you don't see it. Well, too bad. Pride gets in the way. So yeah, there may be people who insist on having their own way, having their own assignments. No, I want to do this. And so, like, for example, somebody might say, I want to be involved in the food ministry. I want to cook. I want to serve in that ministry. And I send people for food training with the town council. The health authorities require restaurant workers to go for food hygiene course, and I consider, because I feed a lot of students, I consider my food helpers to be the equivalent of restaurant workers. So I want them to go for food hygiene lessons and classes, and if they refuse to go or they don't have time to go, then sorry, I cannot put you in this ministry. You've got to do something else. Yeah. And if you insist on cooking and refuse to go for the food hygiene course, then I cannot say, oh, sorry, maybe I make an exception for you because you're such a great cook. When you make one exception and you don't make other exceptions, people will leave because they said you're being unfair, you're showing favoritism, you're not applying same standards to every volunteer. So that's not good. So if people insist on having their own way, then you say to them, yeah, you have your own way in your own ministry, but not in my ministry, not in this ministry that we have together, because you don't want to be together. You don't want to cooperate. So what do you do when people want to leave? People want to leave for different reasons. They're angry, they're frustrated, they want a break, they have something else they need to do. I'm very open. Easy come, easy go. If you want to go, go. I cannot force you to stay, and then you're unhappy and you show it to the students, and that is a bad testimony. So it's okay. You want to leave, leave. But sometimes people who are really good and you are so sad to see them leave, you can always have an open door policy. I always tell them the door is open for you to come back anytime. No loss of face, no judgment, nothing. You just have a different season in life. You've got a kid now, you just got a new kid, and you may be my best teacher, but I have to let you go because you need to take care of your new kid, new job, new responsibilities. Your father has got, you know, some illness and you need to take a break to look after him. Go ahead, go with my blessings. And if you want to come back again, the door is always open for you to come back. Okay, so what do? We let them go. If you want to go, no use keeping them. So what do we do when people need a break or they just want to move on?
I have a question, Pastor Sika.
Yeah, sure.
So when a person left, maybe for personal reasons, right? And then if he or she wants to come back later, do you redo the application procedure again?
Okay, so first of all, if somebody leaves, whether it's for good or bad reasons, angry or not angry, you can, you see, the thing is, data protection law allows you to keep details of a person for as long as necessary. So maybe you keep it for a year, the application form and details, but after a year, maybe you say, look, our law in Canada doesn't allow us to keep data on you. We have destroyed it. So you have to give us all over again because we can't remember what you said and what you, maybe you want to change it too. Yeah, what you like and what you don't like. So yes, if they are maybe been away for more than a year or two, you say, sorry, we don't have any more data on you. Plus, you do want to update yourself, update us on what your latest likes and dislikes are. So please fill in the form and we go through the process again.
Do you usually do the interview?
Yeah. So you can drop some things. For example, if you normally have an interview, but this person is somebody you know very well, you don't need the interview. Interview is with people you don't know, right? But the only thing is maybe you want them to go through the application process again. Unless, of course, it's like, it's an elder of the church and he moves in and out of different ministries. It comes back to, with an elder of the church, as leader of the church, you don't go through the whole rigmarole, right? Interview form, application form, interview, and so on and so forth, because this is a leader of the church, established leader of the church. Why do you need to? So you need to be a bit flexible and just to realize that for certain categories of people, you don't really need to be so rigorous in your selection process and a screening process. But if it's a member of the church that, hey, really, seriously, I mean, I have 5,000 members in this church, and yes, I remember you, I remember your face, but the last time you served with us was 3 years ago. Maybe you should also update us on your skills and your gifts that you have acquired in the meantime. So that should be okay. But people that you've been in touch with, I guess you can dispense with it, right? Okay, Belinda has been in Montreal for 3 years. Now she comes back to Toronto and she says, Pastor Sika, I want to join you again. Sure. Why would I want to go through the interview and all that with you?
So it depends on on the person also, the nature of that volunteer job and also, right?
Nature of the job, yeah. Because okay, when you were with me, for example, okay, you were a food server, so you was a casual or low level involvement, and now you're trained and you're leader of Montreal and you want to come back to Toronto and you want a higher position because now you can be a leader. I may screen you a bit more, right? Just to satisfy myself that you really are suitable now for this other position or a higher position.
Mhm.
So that interview will be necessary, right? Okay, Belinda, what did you do in Montreal? And tell me, what you feel about the ministry. Oh, I remember you said certain things, and you have this attitude. Have you changed your mind? You do. Let's say, I just give a bad example. Say, let's say you are that person that I talk about. You were always so strongly for Hong Kong or against Hong Kong, and I might want to say, hey, Belinda, do you still have the same views? And maybe if you do, I might say, no, maybe I better not take you back. Okay, but for those on record, the reference I had just now about the Hong Kong lady is not Belinda. Okay, just to make clear. Okay, so one of the things that happens is when someone leaves unhappy. Okay, you need to have exit interviews for everyone who leaves. Okay, why do you want to leave? What do you want to do? How do we pray for you after this? It's not just to check on you, but it's just to care for you. We want to know what you're doing next, so that we can pray for you and remember you before the Lord and help you where you're going. Maybe you're just moving to another town, and so maybe I can link you up with a church in the other town. So don't assume that everybody leaves unhappy, even if the last event that was the last straw in the on the camel's back was a quarrel with the team leader or a team member. But don't assume that that's the reason they leave. They just wanted to leave because the father is ill. They have to move to London, Ontario instead of staying in Quebec. No, let it be. But if they are really sort of leaving with a half and a puff and they are angry and you cannot soothe the anger, you could at least say, okay, let's agree not to, let's agree to keep this between ourselves. It's not for you to go and badmouth so and so or badmouth the ministry. Let's leave as brothers and sisters, and the unhappiness, leave it behind. Don't talk about it. Don't talk about it to other people. And um, you may be very angry, but please keep a calm head and cool it. Okay, don't go around spreading unhappy stories about the ministry or the leaders and people inside. And sometimes it has happened. Um, Somebody leaves, and actually most people don't know the reason. It was just a simple reason, like the contract expired. If it says, for example, a staff worker, and the staff worker leaves, and it's because the contract expired and they didn't renew it, or the organization ISMC did not renew it. Sometimes people start rumors. Oh, I think it speculates, you see, because they don't know the reason, and they speculate, oh, I think this was because of this, because of that, and it's all the wrong reasons. If you hear it, stop it. But if you don't hear it, you still can tell people, so and so has left. Do not speculate on the reason. We move on. Okay. Sometimes the reason can be told, you just say it. But if the reason cannot be told, tell them just don't speculate on anything you don't know. So what do we do when people conflict? Yeah, conflict is human. It happens all the time. Sometimes they conflict over the way of doing a ministry. Sometimes they conflict over the judgments on a certain person. I think this person cannot be trusted. You think he can be. So let it be. But sometimes people fight over that, and then they make it an ugly issue, and it spreads to the rest of the ministry. And we've had to deal with that. Uh, in another session, I'll deal with conflict management, but you just have to realize that we are all human. Even with the Christians, we're still sinners saved by the grace of God, and we do have conflicts. Now, one of the things about conflict is that sometimes people don't understand each other, and they quarrel over something they misunderstood. So it's just like, I give the example when I say apple, give me an apple, and you, in your mind straight away, and from your experience, your interpretation of apple is the laptop that you have. And all I was asking was for a green apple because I'm hungry, I want to eat. So you give me a laptop and I go, what are you doing? I'm hungry. I can't eat a laptop. So you might start a quarrel over something like that. Yeah. So this is how conflicts may actually arise due to a misunderstanding. So we need to sometimes drill down to what exactly are you thinking about, and let's resolve that. Okay, I'll talk about this a bit more later on. But what do you do when people conflict? Try and resolve it. What do we do when people leave unannounced and resign? Well, you didn't have the chance to talk to them. They just left and never came back. And sometimes they just leave and they have got duties ahead. They don't tell you, I've got a replacement, and you have to scramble to get a replacement. I've had cooks who, resign the week before they were supposed to be cooking, and then I have to scramble to find new cooks because I have to feed 100 students. So sometimes people do that. Don't be angry with them. Maybe they've got a reason you don't know, and that's a very good reason. And even if it's not a good reason, it
But
comes.
but if they just don't show up,
Yeah,
if
they
you
just don't
rely
show
on
up.
them, right? You
Yeah,
have to
and
have a
you rely on
contingency
them.
plan.
Well, right. Then you don't
Yeah.
put them on any more tasks. Okay. If they want to continue coming to the ministry, let them, but you don't trust them with any more tasks, because you can say, look, I asked you to do something and I couldn't rely on you. You never turned up. So I
Or
cannot.
at least we should be informed beforehand if they're not
Yes.
coming, right?
Yeah.
Because
Tell
we are
people.
counting. Yeah, yeah.
Tell people clearly that they should tell you if they have, you know, maybe they too have unscheduled disruptions. Hey, I just caught COVID. I cannot go. I know it's 2 hours time. The event is coming up, but I just cannot go and spread my disease. So yeah, that's a good reason. But tell them to tell you, right? Because then you can scramble and make alternative arrangements. Which is why also when you have a crucial event and crucial tasks, you need to have contingencies, maybe a second person standing by. And sometimes it's not just maybe it is irresponsibility, but sometimes you just need to know the temperaments of your people. I had a worship leader, okay, and I have an international night. He's the worship leader. He's supposed to be leading worship at certain time. He knows the schedule. Timetable is given to him weeks before, and 7 o'clock he's supposed to turn up. 7 o'clock he's not there. 7:30 he's not there. 8:15 he turns up. He says, sorry, I got caught up, traffic. Oh, I forgot my guitar. I had to go back. Some people are disorganized. It's true. Or some people just are perpetually late. And in this case, I know this person is perpetually late. It's a habit. And not once you know that, you basically say to him, okay, I know in my head 7:30 is the beginning of the worship and he's a worship leader. Tell him to come at 7, because if at 7 you're not here, I'm going to put somebody up. So don't cry that I'm not fair because I need somebody ready and you're not ready. I have somebody else who's leading worship. So sorry, tonight you're not the worship leader. So sometimes you need to be very, it seems a bit harsh, but you need to teach your people that if they are committed to do something, they better be responsible.
Yeah.
And not, yeah, sure, you are habitually late because you have no sense of time, no sense of urgency, you don't have a watch, whatever the reason. I, as the organizer, I've got a backup. And if you're not here at 7 when I told you to be here at 7, yes, the worship is 7:30. I want you to be here at 7. You're not here at 7, the other person takes over, and you're not on tonight. Maybe you're not on ever because I cannot trust you anymore. So I think sometimes these are human issues, right? And human management is a really, really tough thing to do. We learn as we go along. So there is this website that you can click on. The resources there on how to manage volunteers. They give you all kinds of tips. So you have problems, but if you have the time, go read up this website, volunteer.ca. And there are lots of materials there you can read in your own time.
Mhm.
Okay, any other questions? I'll just take a break.
Yeah, I want to know that website. That is from which organization?
It's an organization called Volunteer Canada.
Oh, Volunteer
So
Canada. Okay. All
so
right.
it's a Canadian website.
All right.
And this is a live, I checked, this is a live website still. I had a previous training where I had another sort of URL and it's not alive anymore. So I changed it.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else with a question about volunteers? Because I'm moving on to the next topic.
Yeah, I want to ask a little bit about the food certificate. Like I mean, we did it in Toronto, right? Those who are handling food that they're required to have the food certificate. But I don't see here Montreal. So actually, I need to find. I don't know. It's a provincial thing or
It's usually a town thing. So
a
you
town
go
thing.
to the Montreal Town Council, whatever equivalent you have, and say, hey, or even if you have a friend who runs a restaurant or works in a restaurant, say, hey, where do you go for your training?
Okay.
Manages it, yeah. And I think it's good to, even if you don't have an official thing, you have somebody in your organization, just one person train, and that one person can train others. So because you don't really strictly need a certificate because you're not running a restaurant, right? But I because in People's Church, for example, we pay for them, so it's actually valuable for them. The certificate, after they do the course, they can go and work in restaurants, they can open restaurants, so it's good for you, and we pay for it.
How long does it last for? How long is it valid?
And depends on the town council. It could be 2-3 months, and not every day, but maybe once or twice a week. So it depends on the town council.
No, I mean, how long does the certificate valid?
A year usually, 1 year at a time.
So do they need to do it every
They
year?
need to renew. Yeah, they need to renew because
They renew the license, or they need to renew they need to redo the course.
It's probably just the license most of the time, because once you're trained, you have the license, they just renew the license. They may have it depends on the council, right? They may have a retest, or they may give you a refresher. Yeah, whatever it is.
Yeah, this is I need to find out, because I mean, even my own church here, People's Church in Montreal, I don't even hear, the pastors mention about it when even we have events that people handling food, they don't mention about it. Yeah.
Well, to be honest, I think it's good to be safe, and because you're handling food and you don't want to be sued if somebody gets very sick from or even die. And to be honest with you, People's Church in Toronto started doing it when somebody in Calgary died from a church buffet. An old
Church
lady
buffet.
died. Yeah,
Oh,
church
okay.
buffet. And so they were sued. They were sued for sure. So we decided, hey, where food is concerned, we will have certain rules. For example, in Toronto, you may not remember, but we had to bring food food thermometers. And if you remember, we had to stick the thermometer into the food, into the middle of the food, to make sure that it's 77 degrees. Because if it's not 77 degrees, we have to heat it up till it's that temperature before we can serve it. So Vincent used to do that. He would have the food temp, and he's trained with the food hygiene course. So you take the temperature of the food in the middle of the food, not on the top, because on the top it could be steaming hot, but in the middle it could be cold. It hasn't been heated enough. So we had to assure ourselves that the food was safe to eat before we serve it. Okay. And sometimes when people don't understand, why do you go through all this? No, nobody's gonna die. You say, well, nobody's gonna die, but if one person out of a 10,000 people that we serve, if one person dies, it's a very, very bad testimony. Right? And so what if she's an old lady and she was about to die anyway? She died in church. She died eating food in your ministry. So you just need to be careful, right? Don't be too laissez-faire about it. Okay, so moving on. How do we keep these volunteers? Building a team involves not just working people, like workhorses, and then when tired, you whip them, and then when even more tired, you kill them, and you don't use them anymore. These are not animals, these are not machines, these are people, brothers and sisters we love and God loves. So how do we keep people together? The main thing is, besides work, care for them. Besides just caring that they are early for assignments, that they do it carefully and properly, they go for training courses. Besides that, this is all task. I think we need to build a team by helping them to become friends. Okay, the key word is actually friends, understand each other, and friends forgive each other more easily. So if, for example, Sikyat is very loud, and I I I don't like loud people, but I need to work with him. And then when I know him, I realize, oh, actually, because he lives in Singapore, he grew up in Singapore, it's a very crowded place, it's very noisy, and they've learned to speak loudly. And they forget that maybe in Montreal is a quieter place. You don't need to speak so loud anymore, right? So maybe they need to adjust themselves, but we also can adjust to them and say, okay, I understand you. I'm more willing to accept this quirk of yours rather than be angry every time you speak. So yeah, I actually realized that a lot of Singaporeans, they speak very loudly, they speak very fast, and when they you know become my volunteers, I have to slow them down and say you need to. It's not just the accent, you know, it's not just the Singlish we speak, but also sometimes the speed at which we speak is just so fast that people cannot catch. And if I'm too fast, tell me, right? It does happen. So one of the things to help people to bond and to understand each other would be retreats. Time is precious, but maybe you ask them once a year. We spend time together for a weekend, or maybe even just for a day. So in Toronto, what I do with my leaders is we meet, let's say on a Friday evening, they go home. We don't have to be staying. I mean, they can come to my house. I've got enough space. And then the next morning, come at 10, 9, whatever it is they're willing to come. And then we have Saturday, the whole day, and Sunday we go to church together. So, or we can even have a worship together in the retreat. So this is a retreat where you can do different things. You have fun together, you play games, you have personal time with one another over meals, and maybe even leisure time. You go out and do things together and you talk. You can give feedback to the ministry. You can do training for them, do what we call envisioning, give them a new vision or revise the vision, the camaraderie, the building the friendship. So we have team building games. Corporations do that these days. They get teams to come for corporate retreats, and it's compulsory because they want you to work as a team. So they have team games and stuff like that. And some of the things they do, I think, is like fun, paintballs, shooting. You shoot each other. You go hunting, two teams getting a target, and you shoot each other with paintballs. Whatever it is that's fun for you. So be friends first. And besides retreats, okay, people are too busy for a retreat. At least have socials. Hey guys, before the students come in this fall, we're gonna have a barbecue together. Come to my place, and we have a barbecue, and we're gonna have karaoke, and while we're watching a movie together. So have socials that puts us in informal and casual situations. It's not about work, it's about getting to know each other. And as a leader, you want to know their needs, you want to know their problems, talk to them, maybe even have scheduled time with them, and then find out what they need, what you can pray for them, and then pray with them. So you not only should build relationships with the students, you should build relationships with the team, because if you are ministering to students by building relationships with them, why are you not building relationships with your co-workers? So relationship building includes eating, playing, outings together, calling each other, having a WhatsApp group together, a chat, have fun conversations. Hey, I just heard this joke. Hey, I got this nice video or this new song that's come out. It's so lovely. I've been touched, and so you can share with each other in a WhatsApp group or whatever it is that your group uses, WeChat, whatever. And talking about messaging apps, I when I first started, okay, we didn't know all these things, and then eventually when it came out, I said, not going to use it because we are of a generation that never needed it. But then I realized this is how I have to communicate with my students. So you start off with one, and then you say, oh, you don't have WhatsApp? Oh, you do WeChat. Oh, okay. So I add WeChat. Oh, you don't have WeChat? You don't have WhatsApp? What do you have? Line. Oh, okay. I add Line. So the phone needs to be very heavy with all the apps. Uh, I I I think it depends, right? Because if the students go home, the Koreans have Kakao Talk. The Thai students, the Japanese students, they have Line. The Taiwanese students also have Line. The Chinese students all have WeChat. And you tell them WhatsApp, they say, I don't know how to use WhatsApp. So I think you just, in a ministry, all things to all men and all people. So yeah, so that we may save some. So just too bad, just got to do it.
But is WeChat safe? Because we know that, there's some data and they're collecting information, right? Because we have guidelines that we were told that better not to use WeChat from ISMC.
No,
so yeah.
If you want to communicate with the students, you got no choice, but just don't use for WeChat certain words. You don't use certain numbers. You don't use 6-4 because especially when 6-4 comes, June 4th, because it's June 4th, Tiananmen, all numbers that begin with 6 and 4, they get filtered out. Messages don't arrive. So you just be careful with because if you don't have WeChat and you want to reach your students who've gone home to China, what do? We've got no choice. Right. So I mean, for a long time I didn't have WeChat because I have two excuses. One is what you just said: the Chinese are monitoring it, the Chinese government, and secondly, my Chinese is not that good anyway. So too bad the students have got to communicate with me on WhatsApp.
Yeah, because I'm thinking that are we imposing risks on the students ourselves?
No,
because I mean, for the things that we talk about, or maybe we don't know that it's sensitive, in their category, right? Yeah.
No, you see, what happens is this: if you don't have, you insist on WhatsApp, when they go home to China, they're cut off completely because they cannot use WhatsApp in China. Right? So you got no choice. You really have no choice. It's not a risk. It's a risk they already face themselves when they are communicating in China all the time with WeChat. You just don't talk about politics, and you don't talk about things which are sensitive, to be sensitive. Tiananmen Square, 6-4, Xi Jinping, Winnie the Pooh, because Winnie the Pooh is a way of making fun of Xi Jinping. So yeah, things like that can filter out, fine. But you don't talk sensitive things on WeChat. You can tell for those you need, for example, this is what happens, okay? This is really what happens. I've got Chinese Christians go back, and I said to them, before you go, download Signal. You can access Signal in China. Because if I want to talk to you about sensitive things, Christian things and all that, talk to me on Signal, I'll talk back to you on Signal. So Signal is what you would recommend to those that you want to follow up specifically on sensitive issues. But for the rest, WeChat is fine. You're not going to tell everybody to download Signal because you're not going to talk to them, and they download Signal and you never talk to them ever. Then they say, why did you ask me to download Signal for? You're not using it, right? So yeah, it's not about your risks, it's about their risks. I think that's a sensitive thing to realize. Okay, they are in China. You need to, when you talk to them, you got to say things very carefully that they won't get into trouble. So preferably, I mean, if you want to, don't talk about Christian things. WeChat is, hey, how are you? How's Chengdu today? How are you getting along? Are you reading? You can use code words. Are you reading the book instead of reading the Bible, right? Are you reading the book? Are you going to fellowship meetings? Yeah, sorry, somebody wants to say something. Yeah, okay. So that's how. And one of the things, just remember, I mean, you may have Facebook, but they can't access Facebook in China. So you need to go WeChat. WeChat is their Facebook, their WhatsApp, their everything. It's a super app. Right. Okay. So when we keep people, it's because they feel appreciated. Right. And so you need to constantly be deliberately, okay, I'm not a people-oriented person, I'm a task-oriented person. I just know myself. And so my wife is good. She does this more than I, but I have to deliberately think about, hey, I got to say something. Okay, I have to affirm people who are doing well. I have to give advice. I have to give encouragement and not just advice all the time, because then they see, oh, Siket only tells us what to do. And in fact, I had that reaction from a coworker. Just, when I talk to you, all I get are instructions, and I'm going, is that what I do all the time? And you're the boss. I said, no, I'm not the boss, but you give me instructions all the time. So we don't build a personal relationship. It's all about work. And so I got to be conscious about that. Hey, good job, nice. Uh, so we need to encourage them. We see that they are getting depressed, the spirit is flagging, then you need to shore them up, encourage them, pray with them, and laugh with them, go out to do fun things like maybe just take a meal together, right? And people cheer up usually when you take them out for a meal, especially a nice restaurant. So make them feel wanted, make them feel appreciated. And even if certain people need it, excuse me, need it more than others. So I got people who, I do try. I mean, I've got so many volunteers, and I, talk to different people, link up with different people, and take different people for meals. And some people need it more than others. And, let's say you are able only to take out your coworkers once a month, and somebody may require it to, so if you do it once a month, it's too long for them. Sorry, I mean, there are limitations of what I can do. So it cannot please everybody, but still at least try. Yeah. And if you can't do it one-to-one, at least do it in a group, right? 5 people, 10 people together, do it once a month rather than one-to-one and once in 5 months, right? And yeah, sending out cards. These days, you don't send out physical cards, you send out e-cards and gifts, and even small little gifts like $25 Tim Hortons card, right? Birthdays, sending them emails, calling them, visiting them. This is recognition that I care for you as a person and not just use you as a coworker. Okay, burnout. I talked about people burning out last week, I think. Now, one of the ways to prevent burnout is when people are so tired, so depressed, so discouraged, they don't want to work anymore, and they just quit, and sometimes even quit church completely. So you don't want that to happen. You don't want to be responsible for that. There are things you can do to prevent it. First, of course, when somebody is working in an area of her gift, his gift, then it is usually better, because somehow God's gift is given to those who, then therefore could just keep on burning, because, hey, the resources are from God. The person working in her strength, in his strength, usually finds that this is what they're passionate about, and therefore the passion itself will carry on the fire, right? So match people to the gifts and talents and the strengths they have. Don't ask a disorganized person to be your secretary or your treasurer. Don't ask a very organized person to be your game leader, because games are unpredictable, and organized people want to have everything controllable and predictable. So things are sometimes very interesting, right? Don't ask an introvert to organize a barbecue. Maybe they're good for the task, but maybe the introvert will miss out on relationship things. But sometimes you just have to make do with what you have. Then you've got to say, okay, this person is an introvert. He will never think about group games and group activities. Then I have to do that, or I get somebody else to cover that. So two persons working together, and one person's gift is the other person's weakness, and they can cover each other. Okay, do not overload people. Don't give, willing horses too much to do, or everything that they have to do. Everything you have to do, you give to the willing horses, and there are others who are not worked. Not only would you discourage people and make people angry with the, unfair distribution, you also burn them out. And some people just want to be involved in everything. They just think they are superhuman and they want to, or they can't say no to anyone. So they become overloaded because they allow other people to overload them. And in the end, you have to step in and say, so and so, please stop saying yes. So and so, give up this particular task, give it to somebody else. Or you take it up and give it to somebody else, right? Because they may not want to let go. Do not allow people to be overloaded, because you only are shortening the lifespan of your, not just literally, but just the service lifespan of your co-workers. They may be alive, but they don't serve anymore. That's not good either, right? Be attentive to the details of their lives. Hey, how's your mother? Your sister's got glaucoma. Is she going for a surgery? And then you ask and you pray, so that essentially you're not just using them, right? You care for them. Now, I know that some of us, we are like myself, right? Introvert, not people oriented. And when we do things, we feel so false, right? So hypocritical. And this is something I had to teach my daughter, because my daughter is like me, task oriented. My wife is more people oriented. So both of us have to tell our daughter, this is not being hypocritical. A Christian knows these things have to be done, and you're not naturally doing it. You have to deliberately think about doing it. And so it's not being hypocritical. You're just trying to achieve a standard that God wants, and therefore you're doing your very best, even against your own temperament and your own character and your own inclinations, right? So I'm inclined to hide in a room by myself, but I push myself to go and reach out to people. And so they, especially if they know this, they will appreciate it, right? If you don't know, they know that this takes a lot out of me. It burns me out just to interact with people. Whereas an extrovert, I've got a coworker who's an extrovert. He says, I get charged when I get a big crowd. The bigger the crowd, the happier I am. Yeah, he's an extrovert. So my people have learned, for example, before my Bible study on Fridays in Toronto, 7 p.m., before 7 p.m., I'm in my room, and people start coming at 7, Bible studies at 8. They don't disturb me. They leave me in my room so that they know this is a time I'm recharging. I'm charging up for the evening ahead. Okay, so we understand each other. We give each other room and space. So you're not using people. You understand them, and you work with them within their strengths and their temperaments and their capabilities. And capacity is, how much work. Some people are very eager, but they can only do very little work, and then they get tired, or they get, too overloaded. They only can single task, and you give them multitasking, they mess up. And so you learn to say, okay, this person is a single task person. That's it. You do it. This person is a multitasker. Okay, you can do 2 or 3 things at the same time. So know your people and know what capacity they have. Note the changes in their circumstances and their life seasons. See, sometimes, as I said, they have a new child, they are newly married, they got a new job, and times have changed, seasons have changed. Let them go, let them slow down, let them change their responsibilities, okay, so that they can scale down or scale up because of the change of season, so that they can be more productive rather than less. Okay, or you can, if it, they are newly married, maybe you could even say I give you less and I expect less from you. So don't be burdened by it. You know, I'm always touched by this, not requirement, this statement in the Old Testament that if you're newly married for 1 year, you are spared the duties of uh, defending Israel, yeah, serving as a soldier to defend the people of God. And for those who are your co-workers, help them recruit new workers, help them to work with new helpers. Some people just like to work alone. They say, oh, I can control everything, but they need to work with helpers. Why? Because they may not always be there. They fall sick, they get emergencies, they cannot turn up. Really, there's a traffic breakdown on the highway and nobody can move. They're snowed in, whatever. So we need to have even very good workers to have understudies, deputies, assistants, so that if they get tired, we can also tell them to go take a rest, and the next helper helps. So it's contingency planning, it's good planning, succession planning, whatever they call it. Always make sure you don't have single persons working singly, and when they go to, you don't know what they were doing ever. And so your ministry gets stuck because this guy has been doing this all along, and now that he's gone, we don't know what to do. Okay, that's not good. And some people are just not, I tell my helpers or my co-workers, please get somebody to understudy you and be your assistant. And they say, yes, yes, yes. And then they will do it either because they don't know how to recruit people, or they can't find the right people, or nobody wants to work with them, or whatever the reason is, right? So, or they don't want to look up for people. They feel important. I'm the one in charge. Yeah, they may feel important, it meets the needs, but it's not good for the ministry because this important person, because he or she is important, when they fall sick, they don't turn up, your ministry is stuck. Okay, so, and like I said, people who are appreciated, they feel good, they get recharged, and they will not burn out. And if finally they do burn out, tell them, go take a break. Don't feel guilty about it. I've had to tell people, you're burnout, you must take a 3-month break from the ministry, all ministries, or 1 year. And one of my coworkers, we actually, two of my coworkers, we actually told them to just take a break for 1 whole year and come back if you feel recharged. Don't come back if you don't feel recharged. So it is important that sometimes people get burnout and they must learn to rest. And you yourself must learn to rest in order not to be burned out. One of the things about burnout is this. I mean, what are the symptoms? People do things routinely, it's mechanical, they don't enjoy it anymore, they don't find fun in doing the things they used to have fun in. That's a sign of burnout. When they get depressed, when they get sad and they get tired easily, these are all symptoms of burnout or approaching burnout. So tell them, take a break. We'll cover your duties. It's very important. You're an important person. That's why you cannot break down. Go take a break. And we'll find some things to do, or some other things to do, or some other person to do this. Okay. So take a break for 15 minutes. Come back at 9:50. Before you go, any questions? Okay, no questions. Let's come back at 9:50. Okay, so you got this screen of people sharing a break. Yeah, they've been working hard. So over coffee, you need to have times like that to keep your people. Resolving conflicts. I mentioned earlier on that people will have conflicts, and sometimes the conflicts, if you don't nip them in the bud, they grow and grow and they explode. So whenever you see any personal conflicts, don't ignore them. Don't say, they're adults, they take care of it. Usually they don't, right? So resolve personal conflicts between your workers promptly and fairly. You need to be fair. We had a conflict between two workers, and they were not very nice to each other, said very nasty things to each other. And the leader tried to mediate between the two, and one of the parties decided the leader was too biased to the other person. So sometimes in that sort of situation, you need to escalate, raise it to a next level. So the ministry leader says, I can't resolve it. You think I'm biased against you. We'll raise it to a neutral third party, a party who's not involved in either one of us. So cannot be accused of unfairness and prejudice and favoritism. So they escalated to the next level, which is the senior pastor. No, sorry, the pastor in charge of the ministry. This is a big church, right? So the pastor of the ministry somehow was also seen to be biased. And then it escalated to the senior pastor who knew nothing. And then the accusation was the senior pastor doesn't care. Anyway, he's too busy. So it resulted in both workers leaving the ministry. And perhaps actually, if I was in charge of that situation, then I mean, I didn't know about this till later. I wasn't the leader when that happened, and I had to deal with the aftermath because after that I became the leader. So one of the things I would have done would have been to, if both have to leave anyways, tell them to leave early so it doesn't affect the church and the ministry at all. So sometimes you can't satisfy people all the time and everybody every time. So if it comes to a situation where whatever I do and whatever I say you think I'm biased, then I think maybe both of you should leave the ministry rather than me being seen as biased and I keep one and I don't keep the other. Okay, so sometimes one way to resolve it is for both to, because they don't respect your leadership anyway. Um, unless of course you really were unfair, right? You need to examine yourself and say, okay, maybe I was unfair, maybe I did say some things that sounded unfair and biased, and you go back to the other person and say sorry, let's solve it. Let me apologize. I may have sounded like it, I actually didn't mean it. um, be prepared to move workers and volunteers to places that suit them better, or to reduce their loads, or to tell them to go. Okay, first of all, sometimes conflicts come about because people have different ways of doing things. So you have to say, one of you, maybe you should do something else. And one thing that happens is sometimes they are willing to accept you're the leader, you decide what to do. So I give you an example. I am one of those, not that I'm right, okay, all the time, but my wife and I, we believe that when we deal with international students, because of the way they live their lives, they don't plan, they wait to the last moment to decide on things. So we typically don't, when we have an event, let's say we have Christmas uh, uh, dinner, Thanksgiving dinner at our house, and we say we can take in, let's say, 50 people. And we just let the notice go out, and we wait for who comes, and whoever comes even at the last minute, we open the door and let them in. So one of our co-workers actually, or no, actually more than one co-worker said, why don't you get the students to do an RSVP? Yes, in many ministries you do that. If you want Christmas dinner, please sign up by 20th of December because we need to buy the food and cater for you. So if 16 people say you're coming, we'll just buy 16 portions of food. And yeah, that makes sense. So our co-workers will say, why don't you ask for an RSVP? And my wife and I, we basically say, no, we don't take RSVPs because we have had situations where people would turn up on the 25th itself, never said so before. And because of that one dinner, they come to Christ. I'm not going to turn away somebody like that. Or somebody comes and say, hey, I have two other people. It actually happened one Chinese New Year. This student came up to the door and said to my wife who opened the door, Dorothy, I have two other guests. And we say, oh, okay. Hey, can they come in? I say, she says, yeah, okay. Are they your friends? No, I just met them on the TTC on the subway. So we've got people who would bring total strangers in, and that's our ministry. We say, yeah, sure. And how do we cope with that? I've told you before, we always have extra food in the freezer, pre-cooked food or packaged food, and dumplings that are frozen. We just pour it into the pot and of boiling water, and we got a new dish. So we always have enough food. And if the food is too much, we put them in bento boxes for them to take away. Right. So our style of work, we don't really care about RSVPs. So if we expect 50 people to come and 65 come, we have food for them too. Not everybody can do that, and not every house is big enough to do that. So maybe church you can. So yeah, you can have RSVP, but we do have co-workers who don't agree, but they still work very happily with us. And our condition is, of course, when we are away, times we're back in Singapore and you are in charge of ministry, you do it your way. You can do your RSVPs because that's how you're comfortable with. Go ahead. But we can work together even if we disagree, because I'm the leader, I call the shots. When you're the leader, you call the shots. Okay, I think that's one. Sometimes when mature people work together, that's how they work. And they're still friends. They don't say, oh, you are so impossible. How can you do this? I'm not going to work with you. Well, if you don't want to work with me and there are people like that, feel free to go serve elsewhere. It's okay. Yeah, nothing wrong. It's just different working styles with different working philosophies. And it's not that we can't cope with it, because we can. You see, we are flexible in that sense. But yes, it doesn't mean that somebody who is a bit more rigid is not a good worker, because people are different in their temperaments. Sometimes people, as I said, they disagree with you and they can still work with you. Sometimes people who disagree, you have to tell them maybe another ministry fits you better. You can reduce the loads of your workers if you see them doing too much, taking on too much. And if they really cannot work with you, cannot work in the ministry, you have to tell them to go. They don't agree with your philosophy or the way you work or the things you do. Now, but if you have a person who's in charge, I think it's always good to set the tone that whoever is in charge calls the shots, all right? And you're a co-worker in the committee, maybe under this leadership, then you just have to comply with the leadership or move on to another part of the ministry or another ministry. So be prepared to reassign workers who cannot work together yet. Some people it's just chemistry. Okay, they may even see things the same way, same philosophy, but they just can't work together. They just aggravate each other for sometimes even very petty reasons. Or you speak too loud, or you speak too fast, or whatever it is, right? And yeah, we are all sinners saved by the grace of God. We can be petty. Some of us are more petty than others. It's okay. We work for God. Yeah, we don't work for people. Now, when you terminate somebody and say you have to go, it's also best to do it as a team. A worker who's toxic, a worker who's turning away students, a worker who turning away as in turning away from God, turning them away from God or from Christian faith. People who are damaging the ministry more than they are building it, then you have to say you have to go. These are dangerous people in a way. They're not good testimonies. So when you have to tell somebody to go, it's best to do it as a team. at least 2 or 3 people. You are the senior leaders of the ministry, and you sit down as a team and say, so and so, I'm sorry you have to go. These are the reasons. We see that you work this way. If you can't change, we cannot change you. We don't want to change you, but perhaps it's best for you to do another ministry, go another place, go another church, whatever it is, right? If you don't have the face to stay on anymore in this church, go. It's all right. Sometimes we just have to part ways, like Paul and Silas. They have to part ways. Paul and Barnabas, they have to part ways. So you have to just go, do a different thing. So when you do it as a team, it's not taken as a personal affront. It's not an insult. It's not just because you don't like me, because there are 3 of you. And well, if really the 3 of you don't like me, then maybe I should go anyway. So you terminate people, you do it as a team, and you have witnesses. You see, the other thing is when you have 2 or 3 people sitting down with you, you have witnesses to actually testify that you did say certain things or you didn't say certain things. You're accused of something you didn't say. Well, you've got witnesses to say you didn't say it. So it's to protect both the person leaving and the person who's coming. Maybe they remember differently. Maybe they remember different things. Maybe they remember it wrongly. Well, they've got witnesses. And of course, best if you can document the process. Um, you have to tell them, okay, we are taping this or we are recording this. There will be a transcript. Whether they can read it or not, you can also decide and say so at first, at the beginning. And so we're going to take a transcript, but we're not going to let you read it, which is for the record, to record what we say and the decision process and the decision that's made. Okay, so very aggravating situations, this is necessary. Perhaps if it's somebody who says, oh, I'm tired, I really want to go, you don't need to do this, right? Because it's not really some conflict situation. One of the things that I recommend when you have, go back to the first bullet point, you have to resolve personal conflicts between 2 workers. I would sit the 2 of them together, and you can have 2 persons being the mediators, so they have witnesses, as I said. And you're going to say, okay, we are going to hear each of you, and you're going to hear each other. So what I do is I tell them, maybe one of them who is unhappy, to actually say, all right, I will go first. I will explain why I'm unhappy. So what I do is I tell them to give each other the time. All right. So I'm going to give you A. You're going to speak first, and I give you all the time to say what you want to say. B, you cannot interrupt. You just keep quiet and listen. And if there's anything you disagree with or you want to reply, you write it down on a piece of paper. Because when A finishes talking, I'm going to let you B talk for the same amount of time. So it's being fair. If she talks for 1 hour, you get to talk for 1 hour. If he talks for 50 minutes, you talk for 50 minutes. So we give you equal time, and you have equal opportunity to reply, because while you are talking, A will keep quiet too and write down what he or she needs to write down to reply. So in this process, it's a long process, but as they listen to each other, sometimes they have not listened to each other at all, or they have listened wrongly. And in some of these mediations I've gone through, not always in ministry, but context, I'm a mediator by training too. And in some of these mediations, they may end up suing each other, but actually it all began, as you hear them talk, it all began with a misunderstanding or with an assumption that wasn't correct or true. And sometimes even the words can be, we sometimes when we're angry, we say words we don't mean, and that aggravates the situation. So I remember one situation, this is just as an example, or not a ministry example, but it was a legal case where tenant refuses to pay and the landlord sues the tenant. which they can do in law. I was a mediator called in to talk to them before they go to court, because court is expensive and lawyers are expensive. And as they talked, I realized that the tenant was angry because she says, I am the tenant of this landlady's shop. And yeah, you know, sometimes business is bad and I'm late. And one time this landlord of mine, this landlady of mine came to me and said, you pay up. You're just such a bad businesswoman. You're not a whole business woman. You are a housewife. And that was what got the tenant so angry. She refused to pay at all, and she was sued in court. I just basically said to them, tenant, you have to pay anyway. The contract says so. You owe the money, you have to pay. But you're refusing to pay because she called you a housewife and you're angry. So maybe now, landlady, you hear that, say sorry to her, because that's what made her angry. Not the law, nothing else. It's you just said something that implied that she's incapable, she's only good for nothing, and but staying in the house and be a housewife. That's so insulting to her and patronizing. So landladies, oh, did I say that? Oh, I'm so sorry. I mean, maybe I was angry. I said the wrong thing. I'm sorry. And so they said sorry to each other, and then it was over. The tenant had said her piece, ventilated her frustration and anger, and the landlady heard her and said sorry. And that was the end. Conflict resolved. So I think in ministry situations, sometimes that can happen too. A word is said that was not intended or not shouldn't have been said. Maybe it was intended but shouldn't have been said, and the apologies can happen. When you sue each other in court, of course, the judge doesn't ask you to say sorry. Say sorry. Saying sorry doesn't help, because you still have got to pay compensation. You lose the case. But mediation is when you don't want people to go to court and take it as a legal right or legal obligation. It is to resolve differences, and it's okay even if after they resolve their differences, they don't continue with the ministry. At least they have played a part in making a brother and sister, or two sisters or two brothers, come to an understanding and not be angry with each other anymore. So Jesus called us to be peacemakers. And when we make peace, Jesus is pleased. And it doesn't matter if they don't continue with the ministry. Now, communication is key. As you can see from this example, that sometimes communication goes haywire because somebody said the wrong thing or said it without intending it to be true. I want to talk about 5 levels of communication. Okay. And this is in relation to relationships. There are 5 levels of relationship and 5 levels of communication. The first level is casual, informal, maybe even meaningless. It's a kind of conversation where you say, how are you? Hello, good morning. Things are bad. Things are good. The weather is nice. It's a, casual conversation. You never mean serious things when you talk about casual conversation. Oh, the weather is cold today. I hate cold weather, and I don't know why you are, dressed so little. Sometimes you go, it's a casual conversation, and something like this will start a fight. Right? What do you mean I dress so little? You mean I'm shameless? I'm sleazy? And actually, maybe the other person is meaning you are dressed. To me, you look so underdressed. Not so much that you are dressed immorally or wrongly. So miscommunication can even start at that level. But the first level, just casual conversation between acquaintances, maybe nothing serious is meant, nothing serious is intended. The second level of your communication, so you are, the first level is basically inconsequential, basically conversation. Second level is communication of facts. I am angry. You are nice. The day is humid. These are facts, and communication of facts are between people who may need to work together, and maybe that's a very casual level too, but it's a level that things get done and facts are stated and nobody intends to hurt the other person, right? The third level is communication of opinion. Opinion. I think this is bad. I think this is not the way to do things. I think so. Anything prefaced with I think, this is what I believe. Opinions can differ. You can do the same thing but have different opinions. You can see the same facts and come up to different opinions. And opinions have a tendency to cause conflict because opinions can differ, and people interpret the same facts differently, and so they have conflict potential. So when you come to the level of opinions, level 3, it is very easy to get into conflict. And perhaps when there is a conflict at this level, you have to sit down and, you know, help them see the reasons and the logic and the facts on which they base their opinions, how their perspectives came about. Understanding each other may resolve the opinion difference, or at least to say, okay, I agree to disagree, right? We can move on. Asian cultures are bad with agree to disagree situations. Western cultures are better. I know American friends, Canadian friends, Australian friends who would, argue till their faces are blue and red, and then say, okay, let's agree to disagree. Let's go for a beer, and they go off, and they're friends still. But when two Asians argue till their faces are red and blue, you can be very sure they don't remain friends. That's cultural, maybe, yeah. But that's the level of opinion. The fourth level is the level of feelings. I feel this way. Emotions. I love you. I hate you. Uh, I'm so enamored with you. I so appreciate you. I so admire you. These are feelings. I feel good when I'm in your presence. So feelings. All right. Level 4. Communication of feelings. That's a little dangerous between co-workers if they are of the opposite gender, right? When you are different, your co-workers a different gender, and you communicate feelings have a tendency to be misunderstood and maybe be inappropriate, perhaps because you're co-workers, and therefore communication at the feeling level is a very dangerous level, which I recommend usually you don't communicate that unless you are in a close relationship, boyfriend, girlfriend, siblings, husband and wife, right? So these level 4 is feelings, and level 5, never do it with a person we are not married to. That's the communication of intimacy. Unless, of course, you're brothers, right? And sisters, you're brother and brother, sister and sister, you're the same gender, you can communicate, and maybe your mentor, mentee, you can communicate the ultimate level of accountability, which is intimacy. So you're communicating with a brother, you're a man, you're both men, and you want to communicate, okay, I have sinned. This is a level of confession, right? I have sinned, I've done these things, and pray for me, and you're being accountable to each other. That's the level of intimacy, of intimate secrets. You never tell your intimate secrets to a person of the opposite gender you're not married to. That's the most dangerous communication of all. So you need to draw their boundaries, and co-workers in a ministry generally don't go beyond level 3, communication of opinion. So you do casual conversation, you do communication of fact, and you do communication of opinion. And that's the line to draw. Don't cross it. Communication has filters and noise. So if you do a WhatsApp telephone call, sometimes you get a lot of echoes at the back and a lot of feedback, a lot of noise, that's going to affect your communication because you can't hear properly what's being said, and you may hear something wrongly. Somebody says easy and you hear sleazy, and then you get angry, right? So noise can affect your communication. Filters are things that, yeah, uh, prevent you from fully understanding. When you look at a photo and it's been photoshopped, there's a filter, eyebrow filter or a face tone filter, and it makes you more beautiful. Actually, the picture is not beautiful. Filters in communication are like that. It may come from your education. You're a lawyer, I'm a chemist, and I'm a chemist. I communicate very precisely 1+1=2 because that's the nature of my training. You cannot add uh, hydrogen and oxygen and get calcium. It is water, 2H2O. So it's very precise. Whereas a lawyer may be a little bit more ambiguous in, conversation. I'm, I'm precise in that I want to have everything defined precisely. But when I say black and white, not everything is black and white. There are 5 million shades of gray in between. So my training allows me to accept that black is not always black and white is not always white. And so in that sense, I'm not precise. So these are my filters. My background, in terms of my upbringing, my parents were very serious people, so I never joke with them. And when I see you joke with your parents, I get very puzzled. How can you joke with your parents like that? They are parents, So my upbringing, my culture, my education, my experiences, these are all my filters that come in the way of communication. And so when, for example, you are joking about money, all right, to you, money is, you grew up not caring about money, your parents don't care about money, in the sense of you're not material people, so you are quite carefree about money and you joke about money all the time. I come from a background where money is serious, we're poor all the time, and when we talk about money we quarrel. So when I come with that kind of background, I hear you joking about money, I cannot take it, I cannot accept it. So my filter affects my communication with you. So just understand that when we talk to somebody with a different background, they may have different struggles, and that affects their communication with us. So this is where we allow for feedback, meaning that they explain to us where they come from. And, sometimes we cut off conversation and understanding because we don't have that return message, so to speak, the feedback. So for example, I can go to a person and say, let me pray for you, you have cancer, I know what you're going through. The other person might be thinking, you don't know what I'm going through, you've never had cancer. So your communication, meaningful, caring conversation becomes meaningless because the other person is saying, what are you talking about? You don't know what I'm going through. So there is no feedback. But if she comes back with that feedback, says, no, instead of keeping quiet, she says, no, you don't know what I'm going through. I have chemotherapy. Even if I have had cancer, I never had chemotherapy. She can feedback to me and say, no, I don't think you understand me. I have to go through chemo. You have never had chemo, even though you had cancer. So when the feedback comes back, I can hear it and say, okay, granted, I accept that. So the conversation can move on to the next step. When you communicate with your team members, it is always good to keep people informed. This is the ministry we are sharing together. So we share the joys, we share the problems, and then we pray together. And as we pray together, you may not be involved in this decision or this level of decision making, but we are now owners of this ministry. We pray together. We know its joys, we know its problems, and we can mutually encourage each other. So keep people informed about what's going on so that they also don't speculate, right? Because speculation can lead to rumors and rumors to false news and then misunderstanding. I mentioned a bit about dispute resolution earlier, and one of the clearest instructions comes from Jesus himself in Matthew 18:15-20. And the process of resolution is always this. Step one, go read Matthew 18 yourself. Step one, you go to the person who has offended you and you bring your complaint, feedback, right? This is what you said. This is what I felt. I am angry. Let's talk about it. And then resolve the anger and the misunderstanding. But if the person refuses to hear you or refuses to accept, to apologize, whatever it is that you expect, nothing gets resolved, then you go before witnesses, meaning getting third parties involved, mediators, other people. They may not necessarily be witnesses in that sense that they saw and heard, but if witnesses are available in that sense, then bring them forward. So having witnesses, having third parties involved, that's the second level. And when they cannot resolve it, go to the third level. Jesus says, bring it before the church, before the ecclesia, before the assembly. Doesn't mean the whole church, you could stand up and say, okay, the 300 of you better listen. I've got a problem with Royston and you need to resolve it. No, that's not what it means. I think when Jesus says, bring it before the assembly, most of our modern churches, it means bring it before your leaders and bring it before people who are in a decision-making position, because they represent the church, they represent the assembly or the ministry that you're involved in. And the fourth level, if that cannot resolve it, bring it before God and perhaps even treat this person as a non-believer, because the thing that happened is so unbiblical or so immoral or whatever it is, right? And this person refuses to repent and recant. So that's the resolution process. Ultimately, it is before God. And 1 Corinthians 6:6, Paul says, do not sue each other. Because when you sue each other, when Christians sue each other, the church, the testimony of the church is badly affected. But of course, I mean, there comes a time when the other person is supposedly a Christian, but is acting more like a pagan. I can tell you that I'm a lawyer, and sometimes I feel that Christians don't even act better than pagans. And I think that in that sort of situation, when the person is acting worse than a pagan, he is a pagan, she is a pagan, and they can be sued. Make sure that in your ministry, you make known the escalation structure, meaning if you have a problem, how do you bring it to the next level if it's not resolved at your level? So the Matthew 18 structure is an escalation structure. You can have your own ministry escalation structure. If you have a problem, tell the team leader cannot resolve it, tell it to the ministry leader cannot resolve it, tell it to the supervising pastor, he cannot resolve it, tell it to the senior pastor. So that's a resolution, or to the board of elders. And the dispute resolution process has to be impartial and just. It is seen to be impartial and just, and it's done practically impartial and just. And one of the things, as I mentioned, is to give both sides equal time, equal say, equal opportunity to respond, and let all the frustration and anger be ventilated. Very often, I can tell you, it's just a ventilation of the feelings and everything will be resolved. They do not need a solution most of the time. They just need to hear each other out. How do you keep people? By being prepared to let them leave. Because if people feel constrained, they feel imprisoned, they are in a cage, they will be so frustrated. So tell people you're prepared to let them leave, but you have got backups, you've got contingency plans. And always, as I mentioned here and earlier on, have a backup, an assistant, a deputy, a twice over replacement, meaning if A goes, there's a B, and C is also already trained, so that twice over, if A quits and then B takes over and B quits too, then C is there. At least you can plan that far ahead. And be willing to accept and be ready when people leave, because there are seasons in people's lives, right? They have been very busy before, very committed. Now they can't. New job, new child, new bride, whatever, new spouse. And be prepared to rebuke, correct, dismiss people if it is warranted. Do it as a committee. Get an exit interview so you know what's happened and what can be prevented and what can be improved for future in the ministry. As I mentioned earlier on, keep the door open for a future return for those who are good workers and you want them back. And above all, whatever happens, commit it to God, and God will bring about success. Okay, so that's all I want to say today. Next week will be session 8 and questions. Stop sharing. Yeah. Okay. Questions?
Should I stop recording?
Yeah, sure.